The grand silver halls of the Villeray Imperial Palace shone brightly under the soft glow of floating crystals. It was the day of the Unity Summit, a historic event where humans were invited for the first time to meet the most powerful alien empire in the known galaxy. Among the small group of human delegates, a young linguist named Ravi walked quietly, keeping his head slightly lowered. He had been given one strict instruction before entering the palace: do not speak unless spoken to. Do not draw attention. Simply observe. Ravi understood why. Compared to the Villeray, humanity was still new to space travel, a small voice among hundreds of older, stronger civilizations. The Villeray were proud, elegant, and mysterious, with tall, luminous forms and smooth silver markings on their skin. To offend them would risk ending all chances of peaceful relations. But Ravi was not like the other delegates. He wasn't a politician or a soldier. He was a linguist, someone who studied languages, gestures, and patterns of communication. While others focused on agreements and trade, he was fascinated by the way species expressed themselves without words. He couldn't help but notice the small details others ignored. As the humans followed their guide through a grand corridor, Ravi's eyes wandered. He observed the flowing scripts carved into the palace walls, each symbol glowing faintly. He noticed how the Villeray guards communicated silently with tiny flicks of their hands, short signals, almost like a hidden code. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed the moment they entered the Great Hall. The Great Hall was unlike anything Ravi had ever seen. Hundreds of alien delegates stood beneath a massive dome where shifting constellations danced across the ceiling, as though the entire galaxy floated above their heads. At the center, on a raised platform of shining crystal, sat Queen Sci-Fi of the Villeray Empire. Her presence was commanding yet graceful. Her long silver robe shimmered as if woven from starlight itself, and her calm eyes seemed to look straight through people. Around her stood advisors, soldiers, and attendants, all moving in perfect harmony. The humans bowed deeply, and their leader stepped forward to greet the queen. Ravi stayed in the back, silent, exactly as instructed. That was when he noticed her. To the left of the queen, slightly behind the throne, stood a young girl, perhaps 15 or 16 years old by human standards. She wore a soft teal garment decorated with crystal threads, her pale markings glowing faintly. Her posture was calm, but her gaze was different from everyone else in the hall. While the others watched the proceedings with intense focus, the girl's eyes wandered, unfixed, drifting from one corner of the hall to another. There was a faint distance in them, as though she wasn't fully connected to the sounds around her. Ravi tilted his head slightly, studying her carefully. And then he saw it, her hands. The girl's fingers moved in subtle, repeated patterns. Short gestures. Small shapes in the air. At first, Ravi thought it was random, maybe a nervous habit. But after watching longer, he noticed repetition. The movements weren't meaningless, they were structured. A thought struck him like a flash of lightning. Could it be sign language? Ravi's heart raced. Back on Earth, sign language was invented thousands of years ago so people who could not hear could still communicate fully. But from what he knew, the Villeray had no such system. Their society was built entirely around their melodic speech tones, which shifted in pitch and rhythm like music. If this girl, the queen's daughter, he realized, was truly using signs, then something incredible was happening. Still, he forced himself to stay quiet. This was not the time to speak, not the time to act. He had been warned, humans were guests here, and even the smallest mistake could be seen as disrespect. But Ravi couldn't ignore what he saw. As the summit continued, representatives from other species delivered long speeches about trade, technology, and unity. Ravi pretended to listen, but his attention kept returning to the princess. She shifted slightly, adjusting her robe, and once again her hands began moving discreetly behind her back. Small motions. Repeated patterns. Always precise. Ravi's trained eye caught the rhythm immediately. It wasn't human sign language, but it had a structure, a grammar of its own. He leaned slightly forward, his mind already racing to decode it. Could she be trying to communicate? Then he noticed something else. None of the Villery attendants around her responded. None of them even seemed to notice. It was as if they didn't understand her movements at all. That made no sense. If the princess was indeed deaf, wouldn't the royal court have created some way to communicate with her? Unless, they hadn't. Unless she was completely isolated, trapped in silence even among her own people. The realization made Ravi's chest tighten. Then something unexpected happened. For a brief moment, the princess looked up and their eyes met. Ravi froze. He didn't move, didn't breathe. He expected her to look away, but she didn't. Instead, her gaze lingered, soft yet searching, as though she was silently asking him a question he couldn't yet understand. And in that moment, Ravi had a choice. He could follow orders and remain invisible, or he could take a risk. His hands twitched slightly at his side, his instincts screaming at him to do one small thing, a simple gesture, one human sign, something universal. But he hesitated. Speaking without permission was forbidden. Breaking protocol could endanger the entire mission. Still, something deep inside him whispered, "She's reaching out. She's asking for help. If you stay silent, no one else will answer." And so, Ravi lowered his gaze, hiding his expression, but in his mind, a quiet decision was already forming. He would find a way to communicate with her. No matter the risk. For now, though, he kept still. He said nothing. Because in a room full of voices, sometimes silence carried the loudest truth. The Unity Summit continued, but Ravi's mind was far from the endless speeches and formal introductions. His thoughts kept returning to the young princess standing quietly beside the throne. Her soft teal robe caught the silver light of the hall, but her silence made her stand out more than any jewel or crown. Every few moments, he noticed her delicate fingers moving again, small shapes, patterns, a secret language hidden in plain sight. No one around her seemed to understand. Ravi's chest tightened with both excitement and hesitation. His instincts told him she was using signs, a visual form of communication humans had used for centuries. But this was more than curiosity, it was a chance to connect, a chance to bridge a gap no one else had even noticed. And yet, he hesitated. Humans were strictly forbidden from speaking to the royal family without permission. Breaking protocol could offend the Villery, damage years of diplomatic effort, and possibly end the entire mission. But something deep within Ravi whispered louder than fear, "If I stay silent, she will remain unheard." During a short recess, the great hall became less crowded as delegates left to rest and speak privately. The Queen's advisors surrounded her, discussing trade routes and security agreements. Ravi's fellow human delegates were busy reviewing notes, leaving him momentarily unnoticed. It was now or never. Slowly, carefully, Ravi stepped away from his group and moved a little closer to where the princess stood. She was watching a decorative fountain built into the wall, where shimmering streams of liquid light danced in spirals. Her expression was calm but distant, as though her thoughts were far away from the noisy summit. Ravi hesitated, taking a steady breath. Then, making sure no one else was watching, he raised his hand slightly and formed a simple sign one taught to children on Earth learning their first words. "Hello." At first, nothing happened. The princess didn't move, didn't react. Ravi's heart sank, thinking he'd made a mistake. Then, suddenly, her eyes widened. She turned to him, her silver blue gaze locking onto his hands. Slowly, almost cautiously, she raised her own hand and mirrored the same gesture. Ravi's breath caught in his throat. She understood. Encouraged, he signed again, this time a little slower, forming two words, "Friend." "Human." For a moment, the princess hesitated, her brows knitting slightly as if trying to match the meaning. Then, her fingers moved quickly in return, shaping a response Ravi didn't understand fully but recognized as her own version of the same idea. It was working. Their hands moved carefully, like two travelers building a bridge from opposite sides of a river. Ravi used simple signs he knew from Earth's language, gestures for yes, no, safe, and name. The princess adapted, copying his movements and showing him her own in return. Within minutes, they had shared more words in silence than the Villery court had likely shared with her in years. And then she touched her chest lightly, her fingers curling gently, a sign Ravi guessed meant her name. He repeated it back softly with his hands, Alira. For the first time since he had seen her, the princess smiled. It was small, shy, but bright enough to make Ravi forget the rules, the summit, and the hundreds of silent observers around them. In that moment, there were only two people in the galaxy, one human, one Villery, communicating across worlds without a single spoken word. But the moment didn't stay hidden for long. A sudden hush fell over the surrounding space. Ravi sensed movement and turned his head slightly, only to realize the air had grown heavier, colder. The queen herself, Sci-Fi, was watching them. Her tall, graceful form stood motionless, her silver robe flowing softly around her. The advisors near her had stopped speaking. Guards shifted uneasily, unsure whether to intervene. Ravi froze. His stomach tightened. His mind raced with every possible consequence. He had broken the one rule. He had approached the royal family without permission. He had dared to act. The queen stepped forward, her luminous eyes fixed on Ravi. Every instinct told him to lower his gaze, to apologize, to retreat, but his hands remained by his side, trembling slightly. Then, to his shock, the queen turned her gaze toward her daughter. Alira was signing. Quickly. Fluently. Her hands moved in patterns Ravi recognized and patterns he didn't, pouring out thoughts and emotions she had likely held inside for years. Ravi glanced at the queen and saw something unexpected, tears forming in her bright eyes. The queen slowly raised a hand to silence the guards who were ready to intervene. She took a step closer, her gaze shifting between Ravi and Alira, as if seeing them both for the first time. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a soft voice, musical yet trembling, she whispered something Ravi couldn't understand. One of her advisors leaned in, translating gently. The queen says, she has never heard her daughter's thoughts before. A silence settled over the group, thicker than any words could fill. Even the Villery attendants, who moments earlier hadn't noticed the princess's quiet struggle, now stared with awe and disbelief. The queen reached out, placing her elegant hand on Alira's shoulder, her expression a mixture of love, regret, and gratitude. Finally, she turned to Ravi and spoke directly in her soft, melodic voice. The translator hesitated before relaying her words. You have done what none of our scholars could. You have given my daughter a voice. Ravi bowed deeply, unsure what else to do. His heart was pounding, his throat dry, but inside, something warm blossomed, a quiet pride he couldn't explain. In trying to understand a single girl's silent gestures, he had unintentionally changed everything. The Villery Empire had just witnessed something new, something uniquely human. And though Ravi had no idea where this would lead, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was only the beginning. The day after the incident in the Great Hall, Ravi woke early inside the human delegation's guest quarters. The palace outside was quiet, its tall silver spires glowing softly under the pale morning light. He still couldn't believe what had happened. He had broken protocol. He had taken a risk. And yet, instead of punishment, something unexpected had followed. The queen herself had requested his presence. Ravi replayed the moment over and over in his mind, the look on Princess Alira's face when she had finally communicated freely, the queen's tears, and the quiet awe of the Villery court. For the first time in his life, Ravi felt that his years of studying languages had led him exactly where he was meant to be. but what came next was still uncertain. Later that morning, a Villery attendant guided Ravi through the palace to a private chamber filled with soft light. The room had no windows, only walls covered with silver patterns that pulsed faintly, as though alive. At the center stood Alira, waiting quietly. When Ravi entered, her eyes lit up. Her hands immediately moved a graceful series of signs that Ravi recognized partly from their first exchange. He smiled and signed back, "Hello." Then he noticed someone else in the room, Queen Seraphis. The queen stood tall and calm, watching him closely. A translator beside her spoke gently in human language, "The queen requests that you teach her daughter. She wishes for Alira to have a language she can truly call her own." Ravi felt a wave of relief and excitement. Not only was he not in trouble, but he had been invited to teach. He nodded respectfully and agreed. From that day onward, Ravi began meeting Princess Alira in the private chamber every morning. At first, the lessons were slow. Ravi started with the most basic gestures, simple signs for hello, friend, water, food, and home. Alira learned quickly, copying his movements with surprising precision. Her hands moved like flowing water, elegant yet exact, and within days, she could form short sentences. She signed back to Ravi, sometimes making small mistakes, but each time she corrected herself quickly, her bright eyes filled with determination. One morning, after successfully completing a longer phrase, Alira smiled so widely that Ravi almost laughed out loud. It was the kind of pure, joyful smile that said more than any spoken words ever could. But there was something deeper too, something Ravi noticed as the days passed. Alira wasn't just learning, she was blossoming. For years, she had been surrounded by voices she couldn't hear, conversations she couldn't join, and thoughts she couldn't share. Now, for the first time, her world was opening. She wasn't silent anymore. One afternoon, near the end of their lesson, Ravi tried something different. Instead of teaching her a human sign, he gestured for her to show him her own signs, the ones he had seen her use in the Great Hall before they ever spoke. Alira hesitated at first, then nodded. Slowly, she formed a sequence of hand movements Ravi hadn't taught her, fast, intricate patterns. He watched carefully, taking mental notes. When she finished, he repeated the signs back to her, trying to understand. She corrected a few motions and tried again, her face focused. Finally, Ravi understood, these were signs she had created herself. She had built her own system, a private language of gestures she'd invented over the years to make sense of the world. Ravi was stunned. Alira wasn't just learning, she was a creator, shaping meaning where none had existed before. Word of Alira's progress spread quietly through the palace. Some Villery advisors seemed curious, while others were skeptical. The Villery had always considered spoken tones to be the highest form of intelligence, and some doubted the value of a silent language. But the queen believed in it. She attended several lessons, watching her daughter's hands dance gracefully, tears often shining in her eyes. One day, after Alira signed a complete thought, "I am happy today," the queen whispered something to her translator, "For the first time, I know her heart." Those words stayed with Ravi. He had expected to teach signs, he had not expected to change lives. Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. Ravi was reviewing his notes in the chamber when Alira pointed toward one of the glowing wall carvings. Her hands moved quickly, signing something Ravi didn't immediately understand. She signed again, slower this time. Ravi translated silently in his mind, "It speaks, but not with sound." Curious, he approached the wall and placed his hand against it. A faint vibration pulsed beneath his fingers, like a silent heartbeat. He noticed small symbols carved near the edge, Villery script, but different from what he had seen elsewhere in the palace. He turned to Alira, who gestured insistently. Her signs were fast now, urgent, "I see patterns. Same as my signs." Ravi leaned closer, examining the carvings carefully. To his astonishment, she was right. The glowing patterns on the wall weren't random designs at all, they were a form of visual language, hidden in plain sight. Could it be that Villery ancestors had once used a silent language of their own? If so, why had it been forgotten? Ravi's heart pounded. This was more than teaching a princess, it was uncovering a lost piece of Villery history. When the queen arrived later that night, Ravi explained his discovery carefully, demonstrating the similarities between Alira's invented signs and the ancient wall symbols. The queen listened in silence, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke softly, her voice steady. If this is true, then perhaps we have misunderstood our own past. She placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder and looked at Ravi with quiet gratitude. You have given us more than a language. You may have awakened something we lost long ago. Ravi nodded, humbled but restless. He could feel it now, this was only the beginning. Somewhere deep within Villery history lay secrets waiting to be uncovered. And somehow, a single human, once told to stay silent, had become the key to unlocking them. The private chamber was quiet except for the soft humming of the glowing walls. The symbols carved into the smooth silver surface pulsed faintly, almost as if they were alive. Ravi stood in front of them, tracing the shapes with his fingertips. Princess Alira sat beside him, her bright eyes watching closely, her hands ready to sign. Over the last few days, they had studied the markings together, comparing them to the patterns she had naturally invented. The more Ravi examined them, the more certain he became these weren't just decorations. They were messages. Alira signed slowly, these symbols, like my signs. Ravi nodded, signing back, yes. Similar structure. Meaning hidden. He could feel the weight of the discovery. If the Villery once had a silent language and then abandoned it, it meant there was a missing chapter in their history, one even the queen might not know about. The queen, Sci-Fi, had granted them full permission to study the walls in secret, but she warned them not to discuss their findings outside this chamber. Some of her advisors were skeptical of Ravi's teachings and saw his growing influence as dangerous. But Ravi was too focused to worry about politics. Each night, he and Alira worked side by side, comparing human sign patterns with the ancient symbols. At first, the progress was slow. Some symbols repeated often, while others appeared only once, forming strange sequences. But one evening, after hours of careful study, Ravi noticed something remarkable. The symbols followed a rhythm, almost like steps in a dance. Patterns, he whispered to himself, though Alira caught the thought in his expression. She signed, what pattern? Ravi showed her 3 markings that appeared together on several panels. Using human signs, he explained, I think this means path or journey. Alira's eyes widened with understanding. She signed quickly, show me more. As they pieced together fragments of meaning, a story began to take shape. The carvings described a time long ago when the Villery were not the only rulers of the stars. They had been part of an alliance, many species, united under one purpose. But then, something happened. Something that caused the Villery to abandon the silent language, close the ancient gates, and erase entire pieces of their history. Alira signed slowly, her expression troubled, why hide this? Ravi hesitated before replying, maybe, they wanted to forget. The following day, the queen visited the chamber again, her long silver robe glimmering under the soft light. She watched quietly as Ravi demonstrated what they had learned. Alira signed a complete sentence from the symbols on the wall, we walked among many, but then silence came. The queen's calm composure cracked slightly. Her eyes widened, and she stepped closer, touching the glowing markings as if trying to feel the past hidden within them. Translator, she said softly, and her attendant spoke for her, I have ruled for 70 years, yet I have never seen this language before. Ravi signed gently to Alira, and she repeated it to the queen, your people once used signs, like us. The queen stared at her daughter, then at Ravi, and finally at the walls. For a long moment, she said nothing. That night, after the queen left, Ravi and Alira kept working, driven by curiosity and a strange sense of destiny. Alira seemed more excited than ever, her hands moving quickly as she practiced new signs that matched the ancient patterns. But as they studied deeper, they uncovered something unexpected. Behind one panel of carvings was a hidden layer, tiny etched shapes almost invisible to the naked eye. Ravi carefully traced them with his fingers and realized they weren't Villery symbols at all. They were human-like shapes. Ravi froze, his mind racing. Humans had only reached the stars a few decades ago. How could their symbols exist here, on a palace wall thousands of light years away? Alira noticed his shock and signed urgently, "What is it?" Ravi hesitated, then signed back slowly, "These look like earth signs." Her brows furrowed in confusion, and her hands moved. "Earth, here. Long ago." Ravi nodded silently, his thoughts spiraling. This was no coincidence. The next morning, Ravi requested an audience with the queen. In the throne room, he showed her drawings of the earth-like symbols and explained their meaning. The queen listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she finally spoke, her voice low and steady. "You are certain of this?" Ravi nodded. "These patterns match ancient human signs. Symbols from thousands of years ago." For the first time since meeting her, Ravi saw something unfamiliar in the queen's face, uncertainty. After a long pause, she said softly, almost to herself, "Then, perhaps we were not alone in creating the gates." That evening, Ravi and Alira returned to the chamber and continued studying late into the night. As the final crystal lights dimmed, they finally unlocked the meaning of one large panel that had puzzled them for days. The translation was simple but chilling, "Only the hands of unity may open the stargates." Ravi sat back, staring at the words. His heart pounded. Hands of unity sounded almost exactly like the sign language they had been using, hands communicating silently, across differences. Alira signed slowly, as if testing the thought, "Humans, needed." Ravi nodded, barely breathing. "Yes," he whispered. "Humans, might be the key." Far away, beyond the palace walls, the Helios Gate, the largest ancient structure in the Villery Empire, began to flicker faintly with new streams of light for the first time in centuries. Neither Ravi nor Alira knew it yet, but unlocking the forgotten language had awakened something deep within the galaxy itself. And soon, others would notice. The next few days in the Villery Imperial Palace were filled with quiet tension. Ravi and Princess Alira continued studying the ancient symbols in secret, but outside their private chamber, whispers began to spread. Somehow, despite the queen's efforts to contain it, word had escaped, a human had helped the Villery princess unlock an ancient language. And that language was linked to the Stargate's massive structures across the galaxy, long dormant and mysterious. Ravi could feel the atmosphere shifting. Villery guards seemed more alert, their eyes sharper as they passed him in the corridors. Some advisors avoided speaking to him entirely, while others stared with open suspicion. But none of that mattered to him when he was inside the small chamber with Alira, hands moving silently as they uncovered more fragments of the forgotten past. One evening, as the soft silver lights glowed around them, Alira signed quickly, her movements graceful but urgent, "Look, more panels. More meaning." Ravi leaned closer, his fingers tracing the glowing carvings. This section was different from the rest. The shapes were arranged in a spiral, almost like a path leading outward. After an hour of careful study, the meaning became clear: when the hands of unity rise again, the path will open. Ravi leaned back slowly, his mind racing. The phrase connected perfectly to the earlier translation they had discovered, "Only the hands of unity may open the stargates." He signed carefully to Alira, "Hands, humans and Villery, together." She hesitated, then signed back, "Two kinds needed, both must speak with hands." For the first time, Ravi began to understand. The stargates weren't just Villari technology, they were built for multiple species, requiring cooperation to activate. And humans, with their long history of sign language, might be the missing piece. But before they could study further, the queen arrived, her tall figure framed by the silver doorway. Her expression was calm, but Ravi could see the weight behind her eyes. She gestured for her translator to speak. "Ravi, we have a problem. Other empires have heard of your discovery. They are sending envoys to the Helios Gate. Some do not come in peace." Ravi felt a chill run through him. "How did they find out?" The translator hesitated before answering. "There are spies in this palace." Alira lowered her gaze, her hands resting motionless on her lap. Then she looked at her mother and signed softly, "Danger." The queen nodded, understanding her daughter's signs perfectly, this time a skill she had learned from Ravi's teachings. "Yes, my star," she said quietly. "Great danger." That night, Ravi couldn't sleep. He stood on a balcony overlooking the city of crystal towers, watching the distant glow of the Helios Gate on the horizon. Even from this far, he could see faint streams of light swirling around it, new energy awakening after centuries of silence. He whispered to himself, "It's starting." Suddenly, soft footsteps approached. Ravi turned and saw Alira, her teal robe flowing gently in the cool night breeze. She raised her hands to sign, "You are worried?" Ravi nodded, replying in the same silent language, "Yes. Other species may want to control the gates. Some may fear us. We must be careful." Alira hesitated, then signed back, "But we opened the first door. We cannot stop now." Her determination amazed him. In just a short time, the shy, silent princess had transformed into someone stronger, someone ready to fight not with weapons, but with understanding. The next morning, the palace shook with urgency. A Villari scout ship arrived from the Helios Gate, carrying troubling news. "The gate, it has awakened," the captain reported breathlessly. "Lights have returned. Energy flows through its core. Other fleets are gathering nearby." The queen immediately called a private council. Ravi and Alira were invited to attend. Inside the council chamber, Villari generals debated fiercely. "We should guard the gates and keep their secrets," one declared. "No," another argued. "If other species learn the truth, they may unite against us." Finally, the queen raised her hand, silencing them all. "We cannot hide this any longer," she said firmly. "The gates were not built for us alone. This discovery belongs to the galaxy." Her words hung in the air, powerful and undeniable. Ravi watched her carefully. She had changed too. Since learning to communicate with Alira, her vision of leadership had grown wider, deeper. But he could also see the worry behind her calm expression. That evening, Ravi and Alira returned to the chamber, determined to learn as much as possible before other factions arrived. They focused on one final set of carvings, hidden beneath a layer of dust and crystal. As Ravi cleaned the surface gently, the symbols became clear and the message sent a shiver down his spine. "When the gates awaken, the Watchers will return." He signed the translation to Alira slowly, his movements deliberate. Someone, is coming." Alira's hands trembled slightly as she signed back, "Who are Watchers?" Ravi didn't know. But deep down, he felt the answer wasn't simple. Whoever or whatever the Watchers were, they were tied to the original builders of the gates. And now, because they had unlocked the language, the Watchers might be on their way. Far beyond the Villari Empire, signals rippled through the void of space, traveling faster than light. Across distant star systems, alien civilizations detected the awakening of the gates. Some prepared fleets. Others prepared warnings. And somewhere in the darkness, far beyond known space, the Watchers stirred. Back in the palace, Ravi stood beside Alira on the balcony once more, staring at the glowing Helios gate on the horizon. He signed slowly, almost to himself, "This is bigger than us." Alira nodded, her expression calm but resolute. She signed back, "Then we must be ready." The soft silver winds carried their silent promise into the night. For days, messengers rushed through its shining corridors, bringing news from the outer systems. The Helios Gate, silent for thousands of years, had awakened its silver rings glowing with streams of energy that lit up the surrounding stars. But that was not all. Across the galaxy, other civilizations had noticed. Massive fleets from rival empires were now traveling toward the gate, demanding answers from the Villery. Some came with curiosity. Others came with fear. And a few came with intentions unknown. Inside the Queen's council chamber, tension filled the air. The room was crowded with Villery generals, advisors, and ambassadors. At the center sat Queen Sci-Fi, calm but unreadable, her silver robes flowing softly as she listened. Beside her stood Ravi and Princess Alira, silent observers to a storm building around them. A tall Villery general spoke sharply, his voice echoing through the chamber. "We must secure the gate immediately. The other factions cannot be trusted. If they control its power, the balance of the galaxy will collapse." Another advisor disagreed. "We do not even understand the gates ourselves. If we try to hide the truth, we risk uniting the other empires against us." The Queen raised her hand gently, silencing them. Her eyes rested on Ravi. "Human," she said softly, through her translator. "You have studied the symbols longer than anyone. Tell us, what are the gates?" Ravi hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "From what we've learned, the gates were built by many species, working together. Humans. Villery, maybe even more. They are not weapons. They are bridges." Murmurs spread across the chamber. Some advisors exchanged uneasy glances. Alira signed softly to her mother, and the Queen nodded slowly. The translator spoke, "The princess says, the gates were meant to unite us, not divide us." For a brief moment, silence settled over the council. But it didn't last. Suddenly, a Villery messenger entered the chamber and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," he said urgently, "the first fleet has arrived." The Queen's expression hardened. "Who?" "The Orani Syndicate, High Lady Varys commanding." A ripple of unease moved through the room. The Orani were powerful traders with influence stretching across dozens of systems, but they were known for aggressive diplomacy. "They demand to meet you," the messenger finished. Later that evening, the Villery throne room filled with strangers. A delegation of Orani envoys entered, their tall, slender figures draped in dark metallic robes. At their head walked High Lady Varys, her pale skin glowing faintly under the crystal lights, her eyes sharp and calculating. She stopped before the Queen and bowed, though not deeply. "Your Majesty," she said in a smooth, melodic voice. "We detected the Helios Gates awakening. We know why it happened, and who caused it." Her gaze shifted directly to Ravi. The room went silent. Ravi stood frozen, his heart pounding, as Varys continued. "Your human opened something that was meant to remain closed. Do you even understand what you've done?" Before Ravi could respond, Alira stepped forward, her hands moving quickly. "We learned the truth. The gates belong to all, not one empire." Varys frowned, watching the princess sign, then looked back at the Queen. "A language of hands. Fascinating, but dangerous. The Watchers will come, and when they do, no single world will survive alone." The Queen's expression remained steady, but Ravi caught the small flicker of surprise in her eyes. "The Watchers," she repeated softly. "You know of them?" Varys nodded gravely. "Legends speak of them. Beings older than our empires, guardians, or perhaps owners of the gates. When the gates awaken, they return. That is why we came, Your Majesty." Not to fight, but to prepare. Her words filled the hall like cold air. The Villery generals shifted uncomfortably, while the advisors whispered in confusion. Ravi's thoughts raced. If the Orani had heard of the Watchers, then these legends were not myths, they were warnings. That night, Ravi and Alira returned to the secret chamber. The symbols on the wall glowed softly in the dim light, almost as if they sensed the changes unfolding in the galaxy. Ravi sat cross-legged on the smooth floor, his notebook open, his hands trembling slightly as he signed to Alira, "If the Watchers return, why were the gates made?" Alira hesitated, then pointed to a section of carvings they had not translated yet. Together, they worked slowly, carefully tracing each symbol until the meaning became clear. The translation chilled them both. The gates are not escape. They are invitation. When the stars awaken, the Watchers will choose. Ravi looked at Alira, his voice low and steady. Invitation, not escape. The gates weren't built to flee from the Watchers. They were built to call them. Alira signed slowly, her hands trembling, then, "We woke them." Ravi nodded. "Yes. And now they're coming." The next morning, more fleets began arriving near the Helios Gate, each representing a different power, each demanding control, and each fearing the unknown. The Villery Palace became the center of the galaxy's attention, its halls crowded with envoys from dozens of species. Every discussion ended in the same question: who controls the gates, and what happens when the Watchers arrive? Ravi stood beside Alira on a balcony overlooking the endless city below. The Helios Gate shimmered faintly on the horizon, its silver rings spinning slowly for the first time in living memory. Alira signed softly, her expression serious: "Too many want the power. If they fight, everything breaks." Ravi signed back, "Then we must find the truth before they do." "The gates, the Watchers, all of it?" She nodded firmly, her determination shining brighter than the crystals below. For the first time, Ravi realized something important: the galaxy was no longer divided into Villery, Orani, humans, and others. If they didn't find answers soon, they would all face the Watchers together. Far away, in the deep darkness beyond the edge of known space, a vast structure drifted silently. Its surface was smooth and black, absorbing every ray of light. Then, slowly, faint symbols began to glow across its surface, symbols matching those Ravi and Alira had just uncovered. The Watchers had awakened. And they were already on their way. Beyond the horizon, the Helios Gate shimmered brighter than ever before, its massive rings turning slowly, streams of light spiraling around it. The air carried a quiet hum, like the heartbeat of something ancient waking after endless sleep. And far beyond the gate, in the deepest reaches of space, they were coming. Inside the palace, Queen Sci-Fi sat with Ravi and Princess Alira in the quiet council chamber. The usual chaos of advisors and generals was gone, this was a private moment. Ravi's fingers moved quickly, signing his thoughts to Alira: "We have no time. The Watchers are near." Alira nodded and signed back, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes: "We must understand what they want. Or we lose everything." The Queen watched their silent exchange carefully. In the months since Ravi had arrived, she had learned to read the language of hands almost as well as her daughter. It had brought them closer, but now, more than ever, it gave her the ability to act. "We cannot face this alone," she said softly, her voice firm but gentle. "The other empires gather at the gate, each seeking control, but the truth is, none of us control anything anymore." Ravi looked up at her, understanding what she meant. The stargates weren't weapons. They weren't tools of power. They were something much greater and far more dangerous. That night, they gathered in the observation hall, its crystal walls showing the vastness of space beyond. Leaders from the Orani Syndicate, the Veyron Union, the Kalan Ascendancy, and dozens of other factions stood together for the first time in living memory. Ravi stood at Alira's side, watching as Queen Sci-Fi addressed them. For centuries, we believed the gates were ours. But they were never ours. They are part of something older, something meant to test us. The Watchers are returning, and they will decide if we are worthy. Her words sent a ripple of unease through the room. The Orani leader, High Lady Varese, stepped forward. If they come to judge us, then we must prepare for war. No, the Queen replied firmly. War will destroy us before they even arrive. There must be another way. All eyes turned to Ravi then. The quiet human who had once been invisible was now at the center of everything. He took a deep breath and signed slowly, letting Alira translate aloud, "The gates respond to unity." Humans and Villery together opened the first one. That means, maybe the Watchers want to see if we can work together. If we fight, we fail. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then, slowly, the leaders began to understand. The next day, the skies above Helios changed. A shadow appeared far beyond the gate, massive and silent. At first, it looked like an eclipse, but as it drew closer, details became clear: a vast structure of black metal and shimmering silver lines, larger than any ship built by known civilizations. The first Watcher vessel had arrived. Every fleet around the gate activated defenses, but no weapons were fired. Instead, the ship stopped just beyond the gate, its surface glowing faintly. Suddenly, the gate pulsed with a soft golden light. Symbols, the same as those Ravi and Alira had translated, appeared across its surface. The message was simple: choose. Ravi stared at the words, his heart pounding. Choose what? He whispered. Alira signed back quickly, not choose a leader, choose a path. The meaning became clear: the gates weren't tests of strength. They were tests of trust. The Watchers wanted to see if the species of the galaxy could stand together instead of tearing each other apart. But not everyone agreed. In orbit above Helios, some commanders prepared for battle. Old rivalries burned deep, and fear whispered louder than reason. One wrong move and the entire gathering could fall into chaos. Inside the control chamber of the palace, Ravi turned to the Queen. If even one fleet attacks, it's over. The Watchers will close the gates forever. The Queen placed a hand on his shoulder and nodded. Then we must show them who we are. Not Villery. Not human. Just, beings who choose peace. Minutes later, the Queen walked out onto the grand balcony overlooking the Helios Gate. Thousands watched from below, and millions more across the galaxy. Ravi and Alira stood at her side. She raised her hands not in command, but in silence. Ravi understood immediately and stepped forward, his own hands moving slowly, deliberately, in the language he had taught Alira. Alira mirrored him, her graceful signing amplified by the palace's projection system so that every fleet, every envoy, and every distant viewer could see. Their message was simple: we open the gates together, or not at all. For a long moment, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then, one by one, the other fleets powered down their weapons. The Orani, the Veyron, the Kalin, all of them lowered their defenses and waited. The Helios Gate pulsed again, brighter this time, until the entire sky filled with spirals of golden light. The Watcher vessel responded not with words, but with action. The rings of the gate began to spin faster, faster, until the center rippled like liquid glass. And then, it opened. Beyond the gate lay a corridor of endless stars, brighter and more beautiful than any natural cluster. It was a path, a connection to hundreds of other gates across the galaxy. The Watchers had given their answer. Ravi turned to Alira, who smiled faintly and signed, "We did it." But Ravi shook his head and signed back softly, "No. We all did it." Queen Seraphis watched them, pride shining in her eyes. She had seen her daughter grow stronger, braver, and freer than ever before, and it had begun with a single act of kindness, a quiet human teaching a princess the language of hands. Now, because of that language, the galaxy had spoken together. Far away, the Watcher vessel drifted silently, its glowing symbols fading. No attack came. No judgment fell. Instead, the path ahead was open, an invitation, not a warning. The galaxy had passed the test. For the first time in thousands of years, the Helios Gate was alive. And for the first time ever, the species of the galaxy stood united, ready to face the vast unknown together. And somewhere deep within, Ravi smiled softly, knowing one simple truth: sometimes, the smallest voices change everything.